Have you ever noticed something very simple? When we spend time in nature, climbing a mountain, walking through the countryside, or even just sitting quietly in a park, we often feel calmer and happier. Most people have experienced this feeling. There's a reason why humans naturally feel peaceful in nature. But at the same time, modern life has separated many of us from the natural world. We live in cities, work in offices, and spend much of our time indoors. Even though we depend on the earth every day, we rarely stop to carefully observe the land around us. Most of the time, we only think about what nature can give us: fresh air, beautiful scenery, or a place to relax. But we rarely ask a deeper question: what is nature itself? Today I want to talk about Feng Shui from a perspective that many people overlook. When people hear the word Feng Shui, they often think about furniture placement, decorations, or interior arrangements inside a house. But in traditional Feng Shui, one of the most important subjects is actually the environment outside the house, especially the natural environment. Understanding the relationship between a house and the landscape around it is a central part of authentic Feng Shui. Unfortunately, this deeper aspect is rarely discussed today. So, if you are interested in learning about the deeper principles of traditional Feng Shui, I invite you to stay with me until the end of this video. The original practice of traditional Chinese Feng Shui was known as the art of observing the land. In simple terms, Feng Shui began as the careful study of the shapes and qualities of the earth. In traditional Chinese thought, mountains and rivers were not seen as lifeless objects. Instead, they were understood as living systems of energy, each with their own character and influence. The most subtle and sophisticated knowledge in classical Feng Shui comes from observing these natural patterns in the landscape. This deep observation of nature is the true foundation of Feng Shui. To understand this idea more deeply, we also need to look at a core concept in Taoist philosophy. In Taoism, there is an important idea called the unity between heaven and humanity. This means that human beings and the universe are not separate. We are part of the same system. The universe itself can be understood as a great taiji, containing two fundamental forces, yin and yang. Every living being is also a small taiji, carrying yin and yang within it. In this sense, each person is like a small universe. Our physical body represents yin. Our mind and consciousness represent yang. In Taoist meditation, the purpose is to harmonize the yin and yang within ourselves and reconnect them with the yin and yang of the universe. From the perspective of Feng Shui, a house can also be seen as a small universe. A complete living space contains its own balance of yin and yang. But the yin and yang energy inside a house is strongly influenced by the environment outside. In earlier videos, I mentioned that a house is like a vessel that gathers and holds the energy that nourishes our lives. And the best source of this nourishing energy is nature itself. Because the earth is the mother that nurtures all living things. So how does a Feng Shui practitioner observe the environment around a house? In traditional Feng Shui, mountains represent stillness and stability. They are associated with yin energy. Water represents movement and change. It is associated with yang energy. This is why classical Feng Shui often says a house should have a mountain behind it, symbolizing stable support. In modern interior design, this idea appears in a simpler form. For example, having a solid wall behind the bed or behind where you sit. Mountains represent stability, protection, and grounding. Water, on the other hand, represents movement, wisdom, and action. In popular Feng Shui culture, people often say that water symbolizes wealth, but in a deeper sense, water represents the flow of intelligent thinking and meaningful action. True prosperity does not come from lucky decorations or symbolic objects. It comes from clarity of thought and the right actions flowing naturally in life. One of the most important practices in Feng Shui is learning how to observe nature. In particular, practitioners study the patterns of mountains and rivers. This tradition eventually became known as the Form School of Feng Shui. Form School focuses on the physical shapes of mountains, rivers, and landscapes. We observe the shapes of mountains, the direction of mountain ranges, and the changes in the landscape. At the same time, we observe water. Is it a powerful and fast-moving river, or a gentle and peaceful stream? These different forms of water create very different environmental energies. In Feng Shui, these differences have important meanings. When we begin to carefully observe the mountains and waters of nature, something interesting happens. We start to feel the subtle atmosphere and rhythm of the natural world. Gradually, we begin to understand that our homes are never isolated spaces. In modern cities, we often forget that our homes are still part of a larger natural environment. They are always connected to the environment around them. The true goal of Feng Shui is not simply to adjust the interior of a house. The deeper goal is to create harmony between our living space and the larger environment that surrounds it. Feng Shui is often misunderstood as a system of interior decoration. But at its heart, Feng Shui is really about understanding our relationship with nature. When we learn to observe the landscape, we begin to see how the earth supports and influences our lives. And the more we understand nature, the more we understand Feng Shui. And ultimately, we begin to understand ourselves. If you are interested in exploring the deeper principles of traditional Feng Shui, subscribe to the channel and join me as we continue discovering the wisdom behind authentic Feng Shui.